Okay, this talk is called Einstein's ether theory. Is relativity, i.e. Einstein's relativity, misunderstood? I'm picking up from my previous talk, which was entitled Distance Physics, Beckmann's Theory. This is Tom Bethel. He was an American journalist, and he was supporting Beckmann's theory of physics. And this is Beckmann. He's Professor of Electrical Engineering. Now Beckmann wants to bring back a type of ether, and Bethel connects what Einstein said about ether with Beckmann's ether and says, amazingly, Einstein himself revived Beckmann's idea about the ether in 1916. For details, see Ludwig Kostro's book, which is Einstein and the Ether. I don't know about the 1916 date. I know of Einstein talking about the ether in 1920. So according to Bethel, some of Einstein's allies criticised him for restoring the ether because he had abolished it a decade earlier, and so Einstein bringing back the ether was downplayed. So mainstream physics community doesn't like Einstein's ether theory. However, Einstein's ether theory does get mentioned now and again, and I found it being mentioned in a physics discussion forum, and it was dealing with the question entitled Einstein's General Relativity Misunderstood, and it was by a person who was called Farsight, but I don't know what that is an alias of. My comments on the article will be with an arrow. And so Farsight poses the question, is Einstein's general relativity misunderstood? This was back in 2010. He says, I've been doing a fair amount of research of original material, and the picture of general relativity I get seems to be very different to what I was taught. For example, people tend to say the speed of light is constant, and Einstein said it. But it isn't true. Yes, he started with this as a postulate in 1905, but in 1911 he wrote on the influence of gravitation, that's the paper title, on the propagation of light, where we can see his ideas evolving as he talks about this equation, which I pointed out in one of my papers is sort of mistaken. It should have been what I chose the equation to be. Putting aside a moment for the issue that the equation in Einstein's paper is wrong, carrying on then now with what is said by Farsight. Then in 1916, in section 22 of Relativity, the special and general theory, he talks further. This is Einstein talking further. In the second place, our result shows that according to general theory of relativity, the law of the constancy of the velocity of light in vacuum, well, really should be talking about speed, I think. It constitutes one of the two fundamental assumptions the special theory of relativity, and to which we have already frequently referred, cannot claim any unlimited validity. A curvature rays of light can only take place when the velocity of propagation, probably speed is better than velocity, but we keep passing on that, varies with position. Now we might think that as a consequence of this, the special theory of relativity, and with it the whole theory of relativity, must be laid in the dust. But in reality this is not the case. We can only conclude that the special theory of relativity cannot claim an unlimited domain of validity. Its results only hold so long as we are able to disregard the influences of gravitational fields on the phenomenon, e.g. of light. And Farsight says, IMHO, which means, in my humble opinion, people tend to see the word velocity in the 1920 translation without seeing the context. And I've noted that the German word that's being used can be translated either as velocity or as speed. And in the 1905 paper on which gave special relativity, which is entitled On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies, the word speed would have probably been better than the word velocity. And this is what Farsight goes on to say. Many skip over his references, Einstein's reference, to one of the two fundamental assumptions and don't see that he's talking about a serious issue with the special relativity postulate of the constant speed of light. Many do not realise that Einstein didn't speak English in 1916, and what he actually said was, this is the German, and that translates into the speed of light varies with the locality. And I've had that, put that through Google Translate to see if that comes out right, and it does come out approximately right. The speed of propagation of light varies with the location. Einstein was saying the speed varies with position, hence the reference to that postulate. And what he also said is that that this causes the light to follow a curvilinear path, like a car veers when the near side wheels encounter mud at the side of the road. And I think there was supposed to be a picture here, but it didn't show at the website. People often react badly to this, Farsight says, and what he means is people often react badly to this. I think that means people react badly being told that Einstein's relativity is being misunderstood, because people undergo a lot of time and effort to learn Einstein's relativity at university, and to be told that what they've been taught is wrong is deeply upsetting, and they react badly to that. Einstein talking about the variable speed of light does not fit with the relativity they've been taught. They don't appreciate that relativity today is somehow different to Einstein's relativity. And I say yes because there's been some sort of revisionism to Einstein's relativity that the establishment don't explicitly admit to. There was a renaissance of relativity when a great number of people started working on relativity in the mid-1950s. That's when the revisionism seems to have taken place. And there's been a revisionism that has not been explicitly stated as what they did. So it's kind of revisionism by stealth. Farsight notes something like this further on, and Farsight goes on to say, people think Einstein told us about a curved space-time, but when you read the foundation of the general theory of relativity, which is by Einstein, incredibly it's just not there. Yes, he talks about geometry and curvature and space-time, but he's giving the equations of motion through space. He doesn't talk about motion through space-time like people do these days. Surely everybody knows you can't move through space-time. It's just the mathematical space where we plot our lines. And so there's a difference between mathematical space and a physical space, and mathematical space is space-time. More examples of the revision made to Einstein's relativity. What is taught now about Einstein's relativity is different to what Einstein was saying. There's other things that people aren't taught, such as how Einstein was still derided by many theoreticians even in 1923, and he's given a reference to this in a book about Dirac, the strangest man, which says at that time Cunningham and Eddington were streets ahead of the majority at their Cambridge colleagues who dismissed Einstein's work, ignored it or denied its significance. So there was people who didn't agree with that, and that was at Cambridge. Many people don't know that despite the media accolades and public adoration Einstein drifted out of the mainstream from 1927 when he fell out with Bohr and others over quantum mechanics. They don't know that general relativity was a cottage industry until the 60s, when the golden age changed significantly. And the golden age was meaning the renaissance of relativity. And by cottage industry means that not many people were doing general relativity before the renaissance of relativity. And he goes on to talk about that. The golden age of general relativity is the period roughly from 1960 to 1975, during which the study of general relativity, which had previously been regarded as something of curiosity, entered the mainstream of theoretical physics. During this period, many of the concepts and terms which continue to inspire the imagination of gravitation researchers and members of the general public were introduced, and that was including terms like black holes and gravitational singularity and so forth. And the title is Ether and the Theory of Relativity. There's Einstein talking about space and calling it an ether. And he's quoting Einstein. Mach's ideas finds its full development in the ether of the general theory of relativity. According to this theory, the metrical qualities of the continuum of space-time differ in the environment of different points of space-time and are partly conditioned by the matter existing outside of the territory under consideration. This space-time variability of the reciprocal relations of the standards of space and time, or perhaps the recognition of the fact that empty space in its physical relation is neither homogeneous nor isotropic, compelling us to describe its state by 10 functions, which are the gravitational potentials, has, I think, finally disposed the idea of the view that space is physically empty. So in that part he's pointing out that what you would think of as empty space isn't really empty space, and that's really another way of saying what you'd call empty space has got something like an ether in it. And all in all, it adds up to some huge differences and some surprises. It seems that relativity has always been the Cinderella of modern physics, and despite its vast reputation, Einstein was hardly in the mainstream at all. Moreover, his understanding of gravity doesn't seem to be mainstream anymore, i.e. not Einstein's version is being subjected to a revision. And he goes on to say what's especially surprising is how similar it is to the way Newton described it in optics. So I'm not going to quote that bit, you can read that yourself. And he says about that, the language is different but the underlying concept is the same. The energy tied up as the matter of a planet conditions the surrounding space to create a non-constant term function, along with a gradient in C which causes curvilinear motion. To many people this is unacceptable because it isn't what they've been taught. It doesn't matter that it comes from Einstein and Newton and is supported by experimental evidence who refuse to believe it, i.e. they're refusing to believe that there is an ether. Show them two astronauts carrying a parallel mirror like clocks at different locations and they will refuse to accept, refuse to admit what the different readings on those light clock is telling them. They're taught about coordinate speed and time dilation and spatial curvature, anything to avoid what's in plain view. In a place where the gravitational potential is lower, the light goes slower. Why is it that some people seem unable to see what Einstein actually said, or the evidence that supports it? So Einstein says there's an ether in 1920 and so forth, and suddenly these people don't want to accept it because they're still going by what Einstein said in 1905. And as noted, people react badly to being told Einstein's relativity to be misunderstood, and he gets an abusive reply by someone using an alias Fizzbang. This is Farsight. He gets an abusive reply to his posting. Fizzbang launches into an ad hominem attack on Farsight, omitting here the quote of Farsight which Fizzbang gives. Fizzbang goes on to say, "Have you actually studied relativistic physics at the university level? Have you studied relativistic physics at the postgraduate level? Where and how were you taught?" So it's an ad hominem attack, suggesting that Farsight is not clever enough and educated enough on relativity to be able to deal with it. Next, after quoting Farsight some more, he says, I had thought that after being banned from yet another message board, you had finally given it up on this misunderstanding of yours." So Farsight has been banned on other occasions. "You have previously claimed that you cannot do the detailed mathematics of general relativity, and this is holding you back from actually following what this passage from Einstein actually means." And this is more of Fizzbang's criticism. And my comment to that would be what the mathematics means and what Einstein means by his words. They need to be combined in a coherent way. Anyway, Fizzbang dismisses what Einstein says in 1920 and continues to be abusive. The modulator of the forum then suspends Fizzbang for 2 weeks, and after those 2 weeks, in my view, Fizzbang comes back being even more abusive. And that seems to be the fate of trying to discuss Einstein's ether theory. It upsets people who have learnt relativity and been taught there's no ether to be told otherwise. Dialogues then degenerate into being abusive, and mention it in most physics journals. The people running the physics journals are probably not happy as well, so tend to not want to publish it. That is then the fate of Einstein's ether theory, and it sort of acts as able the mainstream then to be able to sweep things under the carpet. Thank you. The end.